Hello, I'm Dilek Tuna and you're watching A News. Let's take a look at today's top stories. Israel strikes Tehran and Beirut as Trump claims a role in Iran's leadership. President Emmanuel Macron announces France will deliver armoured transport vehicles to the Lebanese army. And Azerbaijan says 4 injured by Iran drone strikes in Nakhchivan and vows to retaliate. US officials say their objective in the war with Iran have not expanded as the conflict enters its 7th day. But US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says firepower over Iran is about to surge dramatically. At the same time, President Donald Trump says Washington wants a role in shaping Iran's future leadership.
The war between Iran, Israel and the United States entered its 7th day on Friday, with airstrikes, missile attacks and naval clashes continuing across the region. US President Donald Trump said in a phone interview with Reuters that Washington should have a role in choosing Iran's future leadership after the conflict. The comment raised questions about whether the United States was seeking regime change in Tehran. US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth denied that the war's objectives had expanded.
Well, there's no expansion. Ultimately, I think the president's having a heck of a say in who runs Iran, given the ongoing operation we have. So there's no expansion in our objectives. We know exactly what we're trying to achieve.
At the same time, Israel says plans to remove Iran's leadership had been discussed months before the current conflict.
We were already in November when we sat with the Prime Minister in a very small forum, and the Prime Minister set a goal to eliminate the Khamenei regime in November.
Iran says at least 1,230 people have been killed since the start of the bombardment. Iranian media also reported missile strikes hitting buildings, including 2 schools in the town of Parand, southwest of Tehran. US officials are investigating whether American forces may have been responsible for an earlier strike on a girls' school in the southern city of Minab, where Iranian authorities say 165 students and staff were killed. Iran has responded with missile and drone attacks targeting Israel and Gulf states, including the United Arab Emirates, Qatar and Bahrain. A refinery in Bahrain caught fire after a missile strike, while Israel reported overnight missile and drone attacks near Tel Aviv. The conflict is also spreading beyond the main front lines. Lebanon's Hezbollah has warned Israeli residents to evacuate towns within 5 kilometers of the border after Israeli airstrikes prompted evacuations in parts of Beirut's southern suburbs.
President Trump says the US will help shape Iran's next leadership after Khamenei's killing, rejecting Mujtaba Khamenei as successor and signaling a sharper phase of Operation Epic Fury.
President Trump has announced that the U.S. will play a key role in reshaping Iran's leadership after the joint U.S.-Israeli strikes have killed Iran's ex-supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. President Trump told reporters on Thursday that he needs to be personally involved in selecting the next leader of Iran, much like he did in Venezuela after removing Nicolas Maduro and putting in a much more friendlier government. Trump said that the selection of Khamenei's son, Mujtaba, as Iran's next leader would be totally unacceptable for him. And he said that the new leader of Iran must totally break from Khamenei's policies of the past. The commanding general of U.S. Central Command, Admiral Brad Cooper, in a recent briefing said that the next phase of Operation Epic Fury will focus on systematically dismantling Iran's missile production capability, which could take some time to fully accomplish. And the Pentagon is preparing to ask Congress for more funding to replenish the military stockpile of Patriot and THAAD air defense missile systems and Tomahawk cruise missiles, all of which are being expended at an unprecedented rate in the ongoing conflict. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth told the press on Thursday that the amount of firepower that will be unleashed against Iran and over Tehran is about to surge dramatically in the very near future. I'm Ube Shabander, A News, Washington.
The US House of Representatives voted on Thursday against a proposal to restrict President Donald Trump's air campaign against Iran. The plan would have required any military action against Iran to receive prior approval from Congress. The vote was 219 against 212 in favour, with Trump's fellow Republicans, who hold a slim majority in the House, providing the support needed to defeat the measure. This means Trump retains full authority to continue his military operations in Iran without needing Congress permission, allowing his campaign to proceed on the 6th day of the escalating conflict. Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky said the US had asked them for help defending Gulf allies against Iranian drones. Asked about the Ukrainian offer, US President Donald Trump said, "I'll take any assistance from any country." Here's more on that story.
Partners are turning to us, to Ukraine, asking for help in defending against Shahed drones with expertise and real operational experience. There have also been requests from the American side. In recent days, I have spoken with the leaders of the UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Jordan, and Kuwait. There will also be negotiations with other regional leaders. We are coordinating with our European partners as well. Of course, any assistance we provide will only be on the condition that it does not weaken our own defense in Ukraine and that it serves as an investment in our diplomatic opportunities. We help those defend themselves from war who help us move closer to a just end to this war.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer said that 4 additional Typhoon fighter jets would be sent to Qatar as the conflict in the Middle East escalates, insisting the UK has the right defence plan in place. The move comes amid criticism from US President Donald Trump over Britain's level of support for strikes on Iran.
I can announce today that we're sending 4 additional Typhoon jets to join our squadron in Qatar, to strengthen our defensive operations in Qatar and across the region.
Staying on this, France is stepping up its support. President Emmanuel Macron announced it will deliver armoured transport vehicles to the Lebanese army. The move is part of a broader plan to strengthen cooperation. Here's more.
France's President Emmanuel Macron says on Thursday he will strengthen military support for Lebanon and send armoured transport vehicles to help the Lebanese army as the country faces rising tensions in the Middle East conflict. Macron said France will increase cooperation with the Lebanese armed forces and provide operational, logistical and humanitarian support to civilians. He warned that everything must be done to stop Lebanon from being dragged further into war. French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot confirmed that aid, including medicine and shelters, is being sent to help displaced civilians.
We must provide humanitarian aid to the tens of thousands of people who are now displaced and far from their homes. This is why we have decided that 5 tons, £11,000 of medical aid and equipment, as well as several tons of humanitarian supplies, will be dispatched and will arrive in Lebanon as early as next week.
Macron urged all sides to step back. He called on Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu not to widen the war into Lebanon and asked Iran not to draw the country further into the conflict. He also said Hezbollah must immediately stop firing rockets into Israel, while Israel should avoid any ground operation on Lebanese territory. A move came after the situation escalated earlier this week after the Iran-backed group Hezbollah fired rockets towards Israel, prompting Israeli airstrikes on Beirut's southern suburbs and parts of southern and eastern Lebanon. Lebanese President Joseph Aoun asked Macron to prevent Israeli strikes on southern Beirut, where residents were told to evacuate suspected Hezbollah areas. Meanwhile, France has begun evacuating its citizens from the Middle East, with hundreds already returned as tensions rise across the region.
Sri Lanka began offloading 208 crew members from a second Iranian vessel near Colombo on Thursday, a day after 87 people were killed and several remain missing following a US submarine strike on an Iranian warship. The first Iranian vessel, Iris Dena, was sunk on Wednesday, far from the Gulf, as tensions between the US, Israel and Iran continue to rise. On Thursday, the Sri Lanka Navy transferred survivors from lifeboats onto stretchers at Gali Naval Base before ambulances took them to hospital. 32 sailors were rescued and are being treated at the National Hospital Gale, while 87 people were killed in the strike. Air travel across the Middle East has been thrown into chaos after US and Israeli strikes on Tehran, leaving thousands stranded. Hundreds of travellers are now returning home through commercial flights and government-organised evacuations. Here's more.
US and Israel launched an attack on Tehran, which has had a knock-on effect to aviation in the region. Numerous flights have been cancelled, leaving people stranded. Passengers arriving in Toronto from Abu Dhabi said they were relieved to be home, but criticised authorities for not doing more to assist citizens stranded in the region.
So I know that many people there are stuck, many people there in our position. I was lucky to jump fast, but I don't know for other people. So I wish if Canada can do something for people there stuck there in the Middle East, because many of them, and I feel Canada, they're not doing as much.
We saw the missiles everywhere, so that was horrible and terrifying. So that's why we are feeling relaxed now.
In the United States, travelers arriving at Washington Dulles International Airport from countries in the Middle East said they were relieved to be away from the danger following the outbreak. However, several passengers said they were disappointed by the limited assistance from authorities.
We had a little bit of a scare this morning at the airport. They had to evacuate due to safety threats, but all the flights were able to take off, which was great.
Meanwhile, Ugandan students and workers evacuated from Iran arrived after the government organized an emergency repatriation effort. Most of them were students who had to put their studies on hold and flee.
In just a week and complete my studies, I come with mixed feelings because I just had a few days to complete my studies and I come completely. But it is unfortunate that things unfolded in a negative way and I had to leave things there.
Indian travelers stranded in Abu Dhabi also returned home after several days of delays caused by cancelled flights and security alerts. Passengers said authorities in the UAE arranged accommodation, food and assistance until flight services resumed. As regional tensions continue, governments are working to bring home citizens and ease travel disruptions across the Middle East.
Cuba has confirmed a fifth death following last week's speedboat shooting off its northern coast. Roberto Alvarez Avila died in hospital on March 4th after being wounded in the incident, the Interior Ministry said. The clash happened on the 25th of February when Cuban forces had opened fire on a speedboat that entered Cuban waters, killing 4 people and wounding 6 others. Authorities say the group was heavily armed with rifles, pistols and nearly 13,000 rounds of ammunition. Officials identified the attackers as Cuban exiles who allegedly planned to infiltrate the island and attack military targets. Venezuela's acting president Delcy Rodriguez has signed oil agreements with international major Shell. State television reported on Thursday, though no further details were provided. This comes after a meeting with US Interior Secretary Doug Burgum on Wednesday in Caracas, during which the two countries also agreed to cooperate on developing Venezuela's mining sector. Burgum, who leads the US National Energy Dominance Council, praised Rodriguez's efforts to open the country to foreign investment, a position also welcomed by US President Donald Trump. Nepal is voting in its first general election since last year's youth-led protests, with early counting now underway across the country. Early counting trends from the Election Commission showed on Friday morning that rapper-turned-politician Balendra Shah and his party were taking a commanding lead in Nepal's general election. The vote follows months of unrest after last year's youth-led protests, which shifted the political mood and drew many young demonstrators to Shah's campaign. After the break, we turn to the latest developments in the war involving Iran as Israeli strikes continue in Tehran and Lebanon, while Iran launches missile and drone attacks across the region. Welcome back to A News. The conflict involving Iran, Israel and the United States continues to escalate, with reports of fresh Israeli strikes inside Iran and in Lebanon targeting Hezbollah positions. Iran has responded with missile and drone attacks across the region, including strikes aimed at Israel and US assets in the Gulf. The fighting has raised growing concerns about the risk of a wider regional war and the possibility of further countries becoming drawn into the conflict. Let's bring in our guest, Tom Gross. He's a political analyst joining us from Tel Aviv, Israel. Tom, welcome to the program.
Good morning. Hi, Dimmock.
Now, what are the main and most important developments in the conflict over the past 24 hours?
Well, you know, when you and I spoke right at the beginning of this war last Saturday, I don't think anyone could imagine that within the first 6 days it would spread from as far afield as Cyprus, which is a European Union country, to the coast of Sri Lanka, you know, in the Indian subcontinent. But it has. Iran has hit at least 11 other countries in the last 6 days. Yesterday, it added Azerbaijan to that list, hitting a school and a regional airport in Azerbaijan. And the Islamic regime seems to be lashing out, trying to draw in other countries into the conflict to try and save itself one way or the other. But the better news for those of us who don't like Iranian ballistic missile attacks is that the US and Israel has been very successful in destroying the ballistic missile launchers, and they're now down 90% compared to the first day of the war 6 days ago, according to both the Israeli military spokesperson and according to the Pentagon. And drone attacks have fallen 83%. This is because Israeli and American planes have been locating and bombing the missile stocks in Iran and the missile launchers. But of course, Iran is a very militaristic country and they still have a lot of weapons left, and they are continuing to fire also at Israel, where during the night they even fired cluster bombs, which, you know, are totally illegal to target civilians with cluster bombs. Because of Israel's very good early warning systems, no one was injured in this particular round, but these are absolutely lethal and deadly bombs which spray out over a large area of many miles into many, many explosives, and it's almost impossible for the missile defense systems to bring them all down because there's so many of them falling at the same time. So the war is ongoing, but at least as far as other countries are concerned, it looks like the Iranian regime's ability to fire missiles and drones at those countries is being reduced day by day.
Now, Tom, Israel has continued strikes in Iran and against Hezbollah in Lebanon. What are the main strategic objectives of these operations?
Well, they are the same strategic objectives which actually Israel has had for years, which is, you know, Israel has no territorial dispute with Iran. It's nowhere near Iran, Israel. And it has no territorial dispute with Lebanon because it withdrew to the international border with Lebanon many years ago. So Iran, or not Iran, the Islamic regime that rules Iran, and its proxy in Lebanon, Hezbollah, are driven ideologically against Jews, against Israel, against the West, and they want to, well, in their own words, death to Israel, to wipe out Israel. No country can live under the kind of constant rocket threat that Israel has been living under from Hezbollah, from Iran, and previously from Hamas and the Houthis. And therefore, the strategic objective of Israel, to answer your question, is to put an end to that threat. That does not mean going to war with the Iranian people or Lebanese people, with which Israel has no quarrel. And I believe that the vast majority of Iranians, and I hope also Lebanese, also have no quarrel with Israel. It is very specifically an ideologically driven movement run from the Islamic Revolutionary Guards and the Ayatollahs in Iran. And that is what Israel's strategic objective is, to push back and hopefully remove that regime.
Okay, and as you said earlier, Tom, Iran has shown it can strike across the region through missiles, drones and allied groups, and 11 other countries have been hit since you and I spoke last. Does that make this conflict fundamentally different from previous confrontations? And how effective have Iran's retaliatory missile and drone attacks been so far?
Well, yes, it is different from other confrontations because it's come into the open. What do I mean by this? It's not that Iran started targeting a whole range of other countries 6 days ago. In fact, the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, and the clue is in their name, revolutionary, have been exporting the Islamic Revolution since they seized power in Iran 47 years ago. So they have been plotting various terror plots really globally. People who don't follow this so closely, including unfortunately many journalists in Europe or diplomats who seem to be asleep at the wheel, need to be reminded that Iran has murdered hundreds of people as far afield as Australia, Thailand, Bulgaria, Georgia. It's attempted to kill in, for example, Australia last year, which is why the Australian government expelled the Iranian ambassador a few months ago. It is attempted to murder in the United States, and it also has murdered hundreds of thousands of people through its proxies in Syria, in Lebanon, in Yemen, in Iraq. So the war didn't internationalize only 6 days ago, but it has changed in the sense that its rocket threat, which has been growing, is now being used to launch against a whole range of Arab capitals and also non-Arab countries like Azerbaijan, Turkey, and Cyprus. And that is one reason the US and Israel felt the need to go to war now to prevent this regime getting any more rockets and even longer range rockets. Its rockets, Iranian regime rockets, can already hit southern Europe. They are aiming to be able to hit as far as the United States. They are a regime which didn't even blink at killing up to 40,000 of its own people, its own citizens in its own capital, Tehran, only a few weeks ago. So, you know, yes, the threat is very, very real. This is a revolutionary, ideological, messianic, if I can use that phrase, Shia Islamic regime, which doesn't have the same rationale as secular people or as you and I. It's you know, willing to kill for what it sees as a revolution. And this conflict has brought into the open how many missiles and drones this regime have. I mean, some people have noticed recently, because Russia needed to buy a lot of Iranian drones and other missiles to use in its war against Ukrainian civilians as well as Ukrainian troops. And that shows just how powerful the Iranian arms industry is, that even Russia, which itself is obviously a capable military power, needs to get supplies from this Iranian regime.
Are we now seeing the emergence of a multi-front conflict involving Iran, Hezbollah, and other regional actors?
Yes, though I wouldn't say it's the emergence of one. I would say this is the most dramatic in a conflict that's been ongoing. I mean, to remind people that one of the very first things the Ayatollahs did when they seized power way back in 1979 was to hold hostage dozens of US diplomats. And, you know, it's not as I said before, this conflict didn't just become internationalized. This regime has made it internationalized. You know, you should compare it to other ideological extremist movements like the Bolsheviks in the Russian, or even the Nazis, in the sense that they spread the revolution, they spread it into their neighbors. The Iranian Revolution tried to spread with regional, if not global, ambitions. So it's not an emergence of a wider conflict. It's a new stage in what was already a wider conflict.
Okay, and as the conflict continues, what's the mood inside Israel right now, Tom? Are people preparing for a prolonged confrontation with Iran?
No, I don't think they're preparing for a prolonged one, at least inside Israel. I think there was an understanding that Israel would get hit. Look, that we should remember the Iranian regime is trying to kill civilians in Israel. It's not like its targets in the Gulf, where it's trying to go for military targets or US embassies. And therefore, as one woman who I know said from Qatar when we were speaking on WhatsApp, that she wasn't fazed as long as she stayed away from the US military base, because Iran wasn't going to just target anywhere in Qatar. In Israel, it's very different. The Israeli regime is trying to murder as many people in Israel as possible, not just Jews, also Palestinian Arabs and other minorities are victims of the rockets of this Iranian regime. Israel has built a very effective missile defense system, but it doesn't always work given the quantity of missiles. And people try to run to bomb shelters and largely get to them. But unfortunately, you have people in wheelchairs or very old people who can't make it. So one of the 2 people who have died in Tel Aviv this week was a 102-year-old who couldn't make it to the bomb shelter in time. Israel has suffered fatalities in other towns like Beit Shemesh, but in Tel Aviv, because of the incredibly sophisticated defense systems, 2 people have died, one of which was the 102-year-old. I might also add the Iranian regime is so unbelievably uncaring even about Islam that they fired missiles at Jerusalem right by the holy sites, including the Al-Aqsa Mosque. So this regime is, out of control and sees no limits, even to, attempting to blow up some of the holiest sites in Islam and potentially spark what would really be a world war.
Even if Israel succeeds militarily in the short term, does this conflict fundamentally change the long-term security equation between Israel and Iran?
If the regime falls, and my own educated guess is that the Iranian regime will not be with us too much longer. I'm an optimist for various factors that will take me a while to go into, while I don't think the regime will survive. So if the regime doesn't survive, it will absolutely change the relation between Israel and Iran, because most Iranians are fairly friendly to Israel or want to have a partnership. If this regime in Tehran goes, I think Israel and Iran will establish fairly warm diplomatic relations, security ties. They have no real dispute between them, Israel and Iran. Indeed, Iran and the West don't really have a dispute. Before the Islamic Revolution, the Iranian government had very good relations with the US, Israel, and other Western countries.
And how are neighbouring states such as Turkey and the Gulf countries responding to the growing instability?
Well, I think that Iran was hitting countries which, it had relatively good relations with, like Oman and Qatar, to try and make them get angry with the US for starting this war and bring them into the Iranian orbit. But the opposite has been the case. I think there's real anger. The Qataris have even been hitting back militarily against the Iranian regime. And I think, if anything, these drone and missile attacks on Gulf states have brought the Gulf states closer to Israel. Even those states, some of them have diplomatic relations with Israel, but even those ones that don't have any formal relations with Israel are in effect now cooperating in full with the Israeli government and Israeli military to together repel Iranian attacks. So countries that don't formally have relations, like Saudi Arabia and Qatar, have been drawn closer to Israel. Regarding Turkey, it's a rather different case. It would take too long to get into, but they have their own, as a big country, as a big power, they have their own agenda in the Middle East that's a bit different than the Gulf states.
And is there any indication that diplomatic channels are still active behind the scenes?
Well, we've heard reports that the Iranian regime have themselves reached out to the Trump administration to offer some kind of ceasefire. I don't know whether these reports are true, but I would say it's too late, and they there's no trust left by this regime. The United States has been negotiating on their nuclear program for 25 years, and the regime has repeatedly lied. Even those people in the American government in the past who first of all wanted to believe the regime, like John Kerry, the Secretary of State, ended up realizing he was being taken for a fool by this regime in Tehran. And no one will trust the Iranian regime unless they actually hand over their enriched uranium and they actually open the society up and stop shooting, women for not covering their heads and so on. So I think there may be some behind the scenes pleas, but I think that moment has passed. And I also think it's clear that Iran's two big regional backers, not regional, global backers, China and Russia, are not at this point going to come and save this Iranian regime. They have also written it off and expect it to fall. And I think China's already looking ahead to future possibilities in Iran when this regime goes.
Tom, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate your analysis.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Have a good day.
You too. And now, after the break, we'll take a look at the major stories from the region. Now let's take a closer look at the key stories shaping the region. Azerbaijan will evacuate staff from its embassy in Tehran and its consulate in Tabriz. Former Foreign Minister Ceyhun Bayramov said the decision was taken on the instructions of President Ilham Aliyev. It follows a drone strike reported on Thursday. Bayramov said diplomatic steps had already been taken and security measures were being strengthened. He added that Azerbaijan will closely monitor the situation and wait for the results of an investigation promised by Iran before deciding on further steps. A drone attack struck Azerbaijan's Nakhchivan exclave on Thursday, raising concerns that the Middle East conflict is spreading further across the region. Azerbaijan blames Iran for the incident, while Tehran denies responsibility.
Azerbaijan says several drones crossed from Iranian territory and struck its Nakhchivan exclave on Thursday, damaging the airport terminal and injuring civilians. The foreign ministry in Baku said one drone hit the airport building, while another exploded near a school in the village of Shakarabad. 4 civilians were reported injured. Azerbaijan said another drone was shot down. President Ilham Aliyev condemned the strike and demanded a clear explanation and apology from Tehran. The government also summoned Iran's ambassador and said it reserves the right to take appropriate response measures. In response to the incident, Azerbaijan's cabinet of ministers announced a temporary suspension of cargo truck traffic at all border checkpoints along the Azerbaijan-Iran state border, including transit shipments. Iran denies any involvement. In a call with Azerbaijan's foreign minister, Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi said Tehran had not targeted its neighbor and suggested the incident could be a false flag operation carried out by Israel to damage relations between the two countries. Iranian officials say their military operations are aimed only at the bases of enemies, such as the United States and Israel. Turkey, a close ally of Azerbaijan, strongly condemned the attack. President Tayyip Erdogan warned against actions that could harm relations between neighboring countries and said Ankara would continue to stand by Baku.
We clearly and openly demonstrated our sensitivity in yesterday's incident. We also issued the necessary warnings so that a similar incident does not occur again. We emphasized the importance of understanding the value of Turkey's friendship. While our struggle for peace as a country and a nation has been evident from day one, no one should adopt a wrongful attitude that undermines the principles of neighborly and brotherly relations. I also spoke with Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev. I expressed to my brother, Ilham, that we are saddened by today's attack targeting the Nakhchivan Autonomous Republic and that we condemn the attack.
The drone incident risks raising tensions in the South Caucasus, with Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Georgia maintaining neutrality to avoid further instability. After the attack, Georgia condemned the incident and expressed support for Azerbaijan, while Armenia and Azerbaijan stressed the need to avoid escalation.
In response, President Ilham Aliyev has strongly condemned the drone attacks, calling it an act of terror and warning that the country's armed forces have been instructed to prepare retaliatory measures.
Iranian drones entered the airspace of Azerbaijan's Nakhchivan Autonomous Republic and struck what authorities describe as civilian sites. Following the incident, President Ilham Aliyev chaired meeting of Security Council.
Bugün İran tərəfindən Azərbaycan ərazisinə qarşı, Azərbaycan dövlətinə qarşı
Today, Iran committed an act of terror against the territory of Azerbaijan, against the state of Azerbaijan.
Ərazisini İran dövləti
The Iranian state fired unmanned aerial vehicles into the territory of the Nakhchivan Autonomous Republic. The targets of the attack were civilian facilities. The Nakhchivan International Airport, its terminal, a school, and other places were subjected to cowardly fire from Iran.
İran tərəfindən namərd atəşə məruz qalmışdır.
Aliyev said Azerbaijan has demanded answers from Tehran and called for those responsible to face justice.
Azərbaycan dövləti bu çirkin terror aktını qətiyyətlə pisləyir.
The state of Azerbaijan vehemently condemns this ugly act of terror, and those who committed it must be immediately held accountable. Iranian officials must provide an explanation to the Azerbaijani side. An apology must be offered, and those who committed this terrorist act must be held criminally liable.
Terror aktını törədənlər cinayət məsuliyyətinə cəlb edilməlidir.
Aliyev also noted that Azerbaijan would not tolerate what he described as aggression and confirmed that the country's military had been instructed to prepare a response.
Biz bu əsassız terror
We will not put up with this groundless act of terror and aggression committed against Azerbaijan. Our armed forces have been instructed to prepare and implement retaliatory measures.
Tədbirləri hazırlansın və həyata keçirilsin.
President Aliyev highlighted that the Iranian ambassador has been summoned to Azerbaijan's foreign ministry and a formal protest note will be delivered. Security agencies have also been placed on heightened readiness.
Bizim dəmir yumruğumuzu onlar görəcəklər.
President of Azerbaijan Ilham Aliyev has met Moldova's Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Mihai Popșoi in Baku. Popșoi delivered greetings from Moldovan President Maia Sandu and expressed solidarity with Azerbaijan following recent drone attacks. During the talks, both sides highlighted mutual support for each other's sovereignty and territorial integrity. They also discussed expanding cooperation in politics, trade, energy and work within international organisations. Tensions in Iran have triggered a wave of evacuations through Azerbaijan's Astara border. Diplomats and civilians from over 47 countries, including Italy, Spain and Azerbaijan, are using the crossing to leave the country safely. The checkpoint has become a crucial route amid regional instability. Achimnaz Shahlar has more details.
Italy's embassy in Iran is evacuating a 45-member staff through the Astara state border checkpoint here in southern Azerbaijan. 8 citizens of Tajikistan, 4 from China and 1 from the Vatican have also crossed through the Astara. Overall, more than 1,300 people have now been evacuated from Iran through this crossing following the US and Israel military operations on February 28. The evacuees represent 45 different countries, including 259 Azerbaijan citizens. Here in Astara, the checkpoint has turned into a key route for people leaving Iran.
We just have factory in Iran, and now for America and Israel, they are make fair. So because of this, so we should go into going back to our country. Azerbaijan, I think, is a beautiful country. We've been here, and now so nice people. Everything is good. Thank you, country. Without your country, without your help, and we can't go back to our country.
Since last night alone, more than 30 people have crossed the border, including citizens of Azerbaijan, Spain and Russia. Astara is now being used not only by civilians but also by diplomatic missions. Most recently, ambassadors and embassy staff from Croatia, Brazil and Spain also left Iran through this crossing. Around 30 people from these embassies entered Azerbaijan safely. I'm Shimnaz Shahlar with Nijat Kasımov reporting from Astara for A News.
NATO has moved to strengthen its ballistic missile defence posture following a missile incident involving Turkish airspace earlier this week. The alliance says the decision comes amid rising regional tensions and concerns over missile activity across the Middle East. Here's more.
NATO has placed its collective ballistic missile defense system on heightened alert after a missile launched toward Turkish airspace was intercepted earlier this week. In a statement issued late Thursday, a NATO spokesman said the alliance had enhanced its defensive posture in response to what he described as Iran's indiscriminate missile attacks across the region. The move followed the interception of a ballistic missile that was fired toward Turkey on Wednesday. According to Turkish authorities, NATO air defense units destroyed the incoming missile over the eastern Mediterranean after it was detected over Iraqi and Syrian airspace. Tehran, for its part, has denied launching any missiles toward Turkish territory, stressing its respect for Turkey's sovereignty. Despite the denial, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has said Ankara was leaving nothing to chance when it comes to protecting the country's borders and airspace. He also said that Turkey was taking all necessary precautions in close coordination with its NATO allies. Turkey has been a member of NATO since 1952 and fields the second largest standing army within the alliance after the United States. Ankara is also set to host a major NATO leaders summit later this summer. This is Adamara for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
A new report warns that thousands of families have been displaced and dozens of civilians killed following days of escalating violence along the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. Tamim Bahis has the details from Kabul.
According to the United Nations, airstrikes and border clashes between Afghanistan and Pakistan have affected at least 10 provinces since late February. At least 56 civilians have been killed and 129 injured, while more than 16,000 families have been newly displaced. That adds to those still displaced by last year's earthquake, bringing the total to more than 23,000 families. Aid agencies say airstrikes have damaged health facilities and humanitarian sites, while access to some areas remains limited due to ongoing fighting. The escalation follows cross-border strikes between Afghan and Pakistani forces. Pakistan says it targeted militants linked to the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, while Afghan authorities condemned the strikes and say they responded with retaliatory attacks. Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has offered to mediate as Russia and China call for de-escalation. But with fighting still continuing, aid agencies warn more people could be displaced. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
And now a sports story important for us here in Azerbaijan. Let's go to Shahdar, where our team is following the Ski Mountaineering European Championship. Here's the latest from the third day of the tournament.
Europe's top skiers are competing in Azerbaijan's northeastern winter resort Shahdar for the third consecutive day. The Ski Mountaineering European Championship is heating up with ruthless battles as a fight for the podium tightens. The weather conditions are just ideal for the athletes. The temperature stands at 0 and the sky is clear. Today, athletes are competing in the individual discipline, which means a long race with multiple climbs and descents. Athletes must adjust their equipment each time to match the landscape, so they perform 5 to 10 transitions or even more depending on the course. For this, skiers carry a backpack, and by equipment transition I mean that in the steep sections of the mountains, athletes change their gear from skis to boots and start to hike. Then on the downhills they switch back to skis again. The faster they make these changes, the better the result. Earlier, we tracked them from above using cable cars and witnessed their ascent. What we saw is that the battle is really fierce on steep hills and extremely physical. Now, I want to quickly mention yesterday's mixed relay discipline results. In the youth event, athletes from Germany secured the gold medal, while Spain and Russia took silver and bronze respectively. In the seniors event, as expected, the Swiss team snatched the gold medal, while Italy and Germany secured silver and bronze respectively. With still 2 days to go, we will be here following the latest updates from the European Championship. Narçiçek Cahangirli, Natiq Mehmedov, Aves Hacıyev, A News.
After the break, we turn to regional developments as Azerbaijan suspends cargo vehicle movement across its border with Iran, following drone strikes in the Nakhchivan Autonomous Republic. We'll examine the security implications of the incident and the wider regional reaction. Stay with us. Welcome back to A News. Azerbaijan has suspended cargo vehicle movement across its border with Iran after drone strikes targeted the Nakhchivan Autonomous Republic. Azerbaijani authorities say the drones crossed from Iranian territory, damaging the airport terminal in Nakhchivan and injuring civilians. Iran has denied involvement in the incident. The developments have raised concerns about regional security and potential economic impact of disrupted transport routes between the two countries. And just to add to our introduction there, we've had a most recent development. While I was here in this broadcast, Azerbaijan has evacuated its diplomatic staff from its embassy in Tehran and consulate in Tabriz as part of the attacks on Nakhchivan yesterday. Now let's bring in our guest, Dr. Reza Talabi, author and journalist from Leipzig, Germany. Dr. Reza, welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Now, do we know about, going back to the drone strikes yesterday, whether this was a deliberate strike on Azerbaijani territory or potentially a misdirected drone linked to the wider conflict?
Yes, first of all, Iran has officially denied responsibility for this attack. However, the situation is quite strange. Reports suggest that the drones involved were the Arash type, which is known to be in the arsenal of the Iranian military. Because of that, it's difficult to imagine that such an operation could happen without some connection to Iranian force. At the same time, Azerbaijan has taken relatively cautious and anti-war position in the current crisis, so it does not make much strategic sense for Iran to attack Nakhchivan directly. One possible explanation is that after the reported death of Ali Khamenei, the change of the military command inside Iran may have become unstable, allowing radical or the uncontrolled factions to act independently. In any case, striking Nakhchivan is extremely sensitive and could create serious consequences for Iran. We should wait for further investigation from Azerbaijan or Iran, but politically the responsibility will ultimately fall off Tehran.
Okay, now relations between Azerbaijan and Iran have often been sensitive, Doctor. Could this incident significantly worsen those tensions? Because President of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, has said that he is expecting accountability and an explanation as far as those strikes go.
Relationship between Tehran and Baku have often been tense, but they have also remained relatively controlled. An important factor is the internal dynamic inside Iran, especially the situation of Azerbaijani population in Iran. Development in Azerbaijan sometimes influence identity discussion among Azerbaijani communities in Iran, which has always been sensitive for Tehran. At the same time, Israel also plays a role in the tension between the two countries. However, the relationship between Tehran and Baku has been complex even beyond border regional conflicts. inside Iran, some political factions have tried to frame the relationship mainly through the lens of the Israel or historical and religious disagreements. But despite this, Baku has generally tried to manage the relationship carefully and prevent it from escalation into the serious crisis.
Okay, Azerbaijan has summoned Iran's ambassador and reserved, and again, also its diplomatic staff. Its embassy in Tehran and consulate in Tabriz has been evacuated. Summoning Iran's ambassador and reserving the right to respond, what diplomatic or security options does Baku have here?
Azerbaijan's response will largely depend on how convincing Iran's explanation is. If Tehran provides the credible explanation and the guarantee that such incidents will not happen again, Baku will likely manage the situation through the diplomacy. However, if the incident is repeated, Azerbaijan could respond much more strongly. Nakhchivan is a very sensitive Azerbaijan's national security. At the same time, some actors inside or outside Iran might try to push Azerbaijan into the direct conflict. But the Azerbaijani president, Mr. Ilham Aliyev, has repeatedly stated that his country does not want to do war with Iran. Still, tension could become even worse than during the crisis following the attack on the Azerbaijani embassy in Tehran.
Well, as a result, Azerbaijan has suspended cargo vehicle movement across the border with Iran. What economic consequences could this have for trade between the two countries?
It's a very complicated question and try to explain this situation. The war involving Iran has already affected regional transport corridors, including the north-south roads. Trade flows have decreased and the normal economic activity has been disrupted. However, if tension increases in the South Caucasus, the consequence will not be limited to the transport corridors around. The more serious issues could be the energy security. This region hosts important pipelines and the energy transit routes connecting the Caspian Basin with global markets. Instability here could be therefore affect not only trade but also the border energy system. And the border energy system, and in many ways, disruptions to energy infrastructure could be far more dangerous than the temporary problem in trade routes.
Could this decision affect broader regional transport corridors connecting the Caucasus with the Middle East?
Yes, important questions. At the moment, there is not clear better alternative route. The corridor throughout Iran has faced economic and security challenges for years, and now the war situation has made it even more unstable. Maritime routes in the southern region are also facing military tension. Because of this, the Caspian and the northern transport corridors currently appear more active and relatively more stable. However, rising tension along these routes could affect not only the South Caucasus but also larger economic players. Countries such as China and Russia rely on same of these networks, and it remains unclear how they would react if the crisis disrupts these routes.
Okay, Dr. Reza, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate your time and your analysis.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
That's the news for this hour. Stay tuned to A News for more updates, and thank you for watching.